This is a revision video on As the Teens Head Brass by Edward Thomas for Year 12 students studying Edexcel poetry. So he was born Philip Edward Thomas. He was born in London in 1878. He's an Anglo-Welsh poet and writer, and he earned a living through reviewing and essays predominantly. But he was kind of dissatisfied with the idea that he had to earn a living through his writing, but he wasn't enjoying it. He married while studying at university, and he only began writing poetry in 1914, encouraged by the American poet Robert Frost. He faced a decision whether to go to war or to America, and he enlisted in the army after being influenced by Robert Frost. So Frost actually sent him an advance copy of his anthology, The Road Not Taken, which is a very, very famous poem about two roads diverging in the forest, one going the easy way and one going the road less travelled, or the road not taken. And Edward Thomas kind of felt that this mocked his indecision. Whether or not that was what Frost intended, Edward Thomas took it a lot more seriously, and it kind of influenced his decision to enlist in the army. Unfortunately, in April 1917, a few weeks after he arrived in France, he was killed in action. His poems are noted for their attention to the English countryside and a certain colloquial style. He used to take long walks and bicycle tours on his own around the country. And perhaps this is evident in the way that he views land in some of his poems. On the 11th of November in 1985, Thomas was among 16 great war poets who were commemorated on a slate stone unveiled in Westminster Abbey's Poets' Corner. The inscription, which was written by fellow poet Wilfred Owen, reads, "My subject is war and the pity of war. The poetry is in the pity." And he was described by Poet Laureate Ted Hughes as the father of us all. As the team's head brass flashed out on the turn, the lovers disappeared into the wood. I sat among the boughs of the fallen elm that strewed the angle of the fallow, and watched the plough narrowing a yellow square of charlock. Every time the horses turned, instead of treading me down, the ploughman leaned upon the handles to say or ask a word about the weather, next about the war. Scraping the share, he faced towards the wood and screwed along the furrow till the brass flashed once more. So you're joining this poem immediately in a moment of action. So it's not kind of before the farming process is taking place, it's not afterwards, but it's as the team's head brass, so you're instantly catapulted into movement and action. A team is a pair of horses that would lead the plough to turn over the soil in the fields. The head brass is the harness that allows the farmer to guide them. So the lovers that Thomas is referring to are a cause for optimism and hope. Is it significant that they therefore disappear in the second line? The fallen elm could represent the fallen soldiers in the Great War. And the narrator is relaxed and he's not rushed. So he's just sitting on this elm and he's just watching the ploughing taking place. So it's quite reflective in its tone. It's interesting that the first thing that the two men talk about is that the weather, and that's the farmer's main concern, and war is second. So instead of portraying this idyllic idea of farming life, Thomas is instead showing how difficult life would have been at home for farmers who were being massively relied upon to still produce the same amount of food, but with less manpower, and the difficulties that they were facing. So it's very realistic as opposed to idealistic. And the verbs show this. So for example, scraping and screwed, and leaning and treading and narrowing, they're all significant to that realistic portrayal. The iambic pentameter, which is used at the beginning of the poem at least, is kind of elevating the working life to the poetic. So it's suggesting that there's some kind of merit, some kind of beauty in the work that the farmer is. The blizzard felled the elm whose crest I sat in by a woodpecker's round hole. The ploughman said, "When will they take it away?" "When the war's over." So the talk began, 1 minute and an interval of 10, a minute more and the same interval. "Have you been out?" "No, and don't want to, perhaps. If I could only come back again, I should. I could spare an arm, I shouldn't want to lose a leg. If I should lose my head, why, so I should want nothing more. Have many gone from here? Yes. Many lost? Yes, a good few. So rural life is left to struggle during the war. The fallen elm suggests the fallen soldiers on the battlefield, and there are more images that you can spot that link with that kind of battle imagery, but in a slightly more subtle way than other war poets that were writing at the time. Farming dominates the discussion, and it's the rhythm of the work and the ploughing that sets the pace of the conversation. So this conversation is being carried out over a significant period of time, because they're having to wait for the plough to go down to the field, come back, and then have their conversation in the little breaks in between. It's a matter-of-fact conversation. There's no pretense or heroism. It's really, really clear, really. Only 2 teams work on the farm this year. One of my mates is dead. The second day in France, they killed him. It was back in March, the very night of the blizzard too. Now, if he had stayed here, we should have moved the tree, and I should not have sat here. Everything would have been different, for it would have been another world. Aye, and a better, though if we could see all might seem good. Then the lovers came out of the wood again. The horses started, and for the last time, I watched the clods crumble and topple over after the ploughshare and the stumbling team. So you've got the short sentences while they're having this conversation. It's kind of clipped emotion. We know that they're feeling more than they're saying, and it creates a kind of broken rhythm, especially in contrast with the iambic pentameter at the beginning. It's a practical but also a personal loss to the farmer. So he's saying only 2 teams work on the farm, but then he's saying that one of my mates is dead. So he's saying that it has a personal effect as well as a practical effect. And the fact that he's saying it in such a colloquial way of one of my mates is dead makes it seem even sadder in the way that he's just stating it in such a matter-of-fact way. The fallen elm represents the fallen soldier, and I think in particular because it was the same night that the soldier was killed, it was the same night of the blizzard, so that connection is made stronger through the through that coincidence, for want of a better word. There's a tragic irony in the fact that if he was still alive and he'd stayed, he would have moved the tree, and they would have had the farmer would have had the help that he needs. And this is referring to the big what if. So it would have been a different world, things would have happened differently, and it gets quite philosophical and reflective. And there is a sense of optimism from the farmer, saying, if we could see all might seem good. So the idea that perhaps something good will come of this. So there's a really kind of quiet optimism in this poem, and a kind of optimistic faith as well. This is perhaps emphasised with the lovers that come out of the wood again, so it could symbolise hope returning, or just the fact that the youth are blissfully unaware of the destruction around them. So you could be making a comment about that as well. Ploughing itself as an activity suggests renewal. It's a necessary farming process to churn up the earth, and therefore perhaps the idea that this is necessary, that this is a process that's going to happen, but we're going to recover from it, perhaps symbolises hope as well. And the iambic pentameter returns at the end. The enjambment stops, and that perhaps indicates that things will return to their status quo. Also, the clods crumbling and toppling over and the stumbling team again remind you of the battle imagery, of the idea of the soldiers fighting in a foreign country.